Hello everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. Snow drifted lazily over Chicago that evening, as Elena Cruz battled with a coffee machine that hissed like it wanted revenge. "Come on, don't embarrass me in front of the rich guy," she muttered, just as a puff of steam hit her face. From the corner, Damian Harlow, once a Silicon Valley star, now a man rebuilding from ruin, couldn't help but laugh. It was the first real laugh he'd had in months. "Glad I could entertain you," Elena said dryly. "Best show I've seen all year," he replied. They were opposites. She, a single mom fighting through every day. He, a fallen billionaire hiding behind sarcasm and black coffee. But fate had a sense of humor. That night, Damian returned after closing, rain dripping from his coat, eyes heavy with desperation. "Elena," he said quietly, "I need your help. Pretend to be my wife. Just for one night." Elena blinked. "You're joking, right?" "I never joke about disasters," he said. And that's how it started. Not with love at first sight, but with the most ridiculous request of her life. A deal born from lies that would end up rewriting both their hearts. The wind screamed down the empty streets of Chicago, carrying with it the kind of cold that could slice through bone. Inside a dim apartment on the 7th floor, Damian Harlow sat motionless before a half-empty glass of bourbon, eyes fixed on the newspaper headline that might as well have been his obituary. "Harlow Technologies declares bankruptcy." The ink smudged under his thumb, but the words stayed burned into his mind. Once his name had stood for innovation, power, and obscene wealth. Now it was a punchline, the fall of the tech messiah who'd flown too close to the sun. His phone buzzed. A notification from a news site. Former CEO Damian Harlow under investigation for fraud. He didn't even open it. He knew the narrative. The media had already written his villain arc. And maybe they weren't wrong. Elias Monroe, his business partner and best friend since college, had taken what was left of the company, and his wife, apparently. The betrayal wasn't a knife. It was a slow bleed. Every day another piece of him disappeared. He leaned back, staring at the city lights through rain-streaked windows. Chicago glittered like it didn't care who fell from grace. He gave a dry laugh. "To success," he muttered, lifting his glass in a mock toast before draining it. But bourbon couldn't burn away regret. Hours later, needing air, or maybe punishment, Damian wandered into the streets, coat collar turned up against the wind. Neon lights blinked through the drizzle, and the smell of wet asphalt filled his lungs. That's when he saw it. A tiny coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Crescent Moon Cafe. The warmth hit him the second he stepped inside. It smelled of cinnamon, espresso, and something heartbreakingly human. Behind the counter, Elena Cruz wrestled with a stubborn espresso machine that hissed and sputtered like a dragon on its last breath. She was small, with tired eyes that still managed to hold a spark, the kind of woman who'd learned to smile even when life kept taking. "Come on. Don't die on me now," she whispered to the machine, tapping it gently. It responded by spitting steam in her face. Damian couldn't help it. He laughed. A real laugh. The sound startled him as much as it did her. "Oh, glad I could entertain you," she said, wiping her cheek with the back of her sleeve. "Best performance I've seen all year," he said, settling at the counter. His voice was rough, half amusement, half exhaustion. "Then you must not get out much," she replied with a smirk, handing him a menu that had clearly seen better days. He studied her, not in the way men usually looked at women, but with the quiet curiosity of someone trying to remember what kindness looked like. Her apron was splattered with coffee, her hair tied up in a messy bun, and yet there was something steady in her presence. "Double espresso," he finally said. "Make it strong enough to wake the dead." She nodded. "Coming right up. Though you look more like you need sleep than caffeine." He almost smiled. "Sleep's overrated." A bell jingled as the door opened. A man in a suit barged in, snapping at someone on the phone. He looked at Elena, irritation dripping from every syllable. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hurry it up? Some of us actually have jobs to get to." Elena blinked, still polite. "Of course, sir." "It'll just be a minute." Yeah, he cut her off, rolling his eyes. Damien watched the exchange quietly. Something in his chest tightened. Not anger exactly, but recognition. The tone, the dismissal, the way the world chewed up good people like her without a thought. When the man finally stormed out, Elena just exhaled, shoulders sagging. She caught Damien's gaze and offered a small, sheepish grin. Don't worry, he's a regular. I think he enjoys yelling more than coffee. Damien shook his head. You didn't even flinch. Not worth the energy, she said lightly. I save my meltdowns for broken machines and rent day. He chuckled, and for a moment, the world outside, the lawsuits, the headlines, the betrayal, faded. When she brought his drink, he noticed her hands, small, calloused, steady. You work nights? He asked. Days, nights, whenever they need me, she said. Bills don't really care about sleep schedules. Single mom? The words slipped out before he could stop them. She looked at him surprised. Is it that obvious? He shrugged. Just a guess, she smiled faintly. Yeah, my son's 6. He thinks I'm a superhero because I can make chocolate milk without spilling. I haven't told him that's my only superpower. He smiled, a real one this time. That's still more impressive than half the people I used to work with. Let me guess, she teased. Corporate type? Used to be, he said quietly. Now I'm just between lives. Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding. Not pity, not curiosity, just silent recognition. 2 strangers, both haunted by what they'd lost, sitting in a coffee shop that smelled of second chances. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless. Inside, for the first time in months, Damien felt something thaw. When he finally stood to leave, he slipped a generous tip under the cup. Elena noticed and frowned. Hey, that's too much. Consider it hazard pay, he said. For surviving tonight's customers, she laughed softly. Then you're my favorite disaster of the day. He opened the door, letting the wind rush in. For a moment, he turned back, meeting her eyes again. There was no spark of romance yet, no cinematic music swelling in the background. Just 2 tired souls, seeing each other, really seeing, for the first time. And though neither of them knew it, that tiny exchange would change everything. Because sometimes love doesn't enter with fireworks. It slips quietly into the cracks of your brokenness, and stays. Chicago woke under a sheet of gray that morning, cold, wet, and unwelcoming. Snow melted into slush on the sidewalks, mixing with the city's restless rhythm. Inside a rented office space, Damien Harlow sat in front of his laptop, eyes blank. Emails filled the screen. Project canceled. Funding withdrawn. Partnership terminated. He closed the lid, leaned back, and let out a breath that tasted like defeat. The silence around him was heavy. The kind that made you feel how empty your life had become. And then, like a flicker of warmth in his chest, he remembered last night. The cafe. The hiss of the coffee machine, the cinnamon in the air, and the woman who smiled through exhaustion. Elena Cruz. She had no idea who he was, and for some reason, that felt good. His phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his pulse tighten. Harper Lynn. He hesitated, then picked up. Harper. Her voice poured through the line, smooth, confident, a little too familiar. Damien. I heard you're working on something new. He sat up. Trying to, why? I might be interested, she said. But investors these days, they want stability. Predictability. They want to know the man they're backing isn't still a storm. He frowned. Meaning? I need to see that you've changed, she replied. That you've grown roots. That you're the kind of man who goes home to a wife. Not a scandal. He gave a short, dry laugh. You want me to bring a wife to prove I'm trustworthy? Exactly, Harper said lightly. Bring her to the gala next Friday. I'd love to meet her. And before he could answer, the line went dead. For a long moment, Damien just sat there, staring at nothing. A wife, right. He barely had enough stability to keep his own lights on, but the idea wouldn't leave him. He needed credibility. He needed an image, Something clean, simple, believable. And then her face came back to him. The cafe girl, Elena Cruz. She was real, unpolished, sincere. Someone no one in his world would ever suspect of lying, which made her perfect. It was reckless. It was insane. And it was exactly what he needed. That evening, the cafe door chimed again. Elena looked up from the counter, eyebrows rising. You again? Back for coffee or a crisis? Damien stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. A little of both, she laughed softly. Fair warning, caffeine's cheaper than therapy. He gave a small, almost nervous smile. I need a favor. Oh boy, she said. That already sounds like trouble. It is, he admitted. But it pays well. Elena folded her arms. You realize that's exactly how kidnappers start a conversation, right? No kidnapping, he said, meeting her eyes. Just pretending. Pretending what? He took a breath. I need you to be my wife. Her mouth fell open. I'm sorry, what? I have an investor meeting, he explained quickly. A woman named Harper Lynn. She believes in family men. If I show up alone, she'll walk. If I show up married, she'll trust you, Elena finished. And you want me to play the part? He nodded. One night. That's it, she blinked. Do you even hear yourself right now? You sound insane. I know, he said, calm as ever. But desperate men come up with creative ideas. And I'm supposed to help you lie to a millionaire? I'll pay you $25,000. The room went silent. Elena stared at him. $25,000? For one night? He slid a check across the counter. For one night, her heart skipped. That money could change everything. Her son's medical bills, their overdue rent, all of it. Still, she forced a laugh. You think I can be bought that easily? No, Damien said softly. I think you're the only one who'd make it believable. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them tightened, charged, uncertain. Then Elena exhaled. You realize this is the dumbest plan I've ever heard. He smiled faintly. I'm counting on that. They sealed the deal with a handshake, quick, awkward, but binding in a way that made them both uneasy. Let's get one thing straight, Elena said. We're not friends. This is just business. Good, he replied. I'm terrible at friendship. And after the gala, we never speak again. That's the plan. But as her hand slipped from his, Damien felt something shift. Something dangerous. Something alive. The next few days were chaos. He tried to send a driver. She refused. He booked a stylist. She fired her. He gave her a script. She tossed it back. If you want it to sound real, she said, you'll have to let me be myself. Against his better judgment, he agreed. And somehow, it worked. Elena didn't glide or pose. She breathed life into every space she walked into. She laughed loudly, argued with confidence, and turned every disaster into something oddly human. By the time Friday approached, Damien couldn't tell if he was losing his mind. Or his walls. 2 nights before the gala, they met for dinner to rehearse their story. He came with a folder full of fake details. How they met, where they lived. Their imaginary dog named Baxter. Elena flipped through the pages unimpressed. We met at a charity event in New York. Fell in love over jazz music. Got married in Italy. You sound like a Pinterest board. It's believable, he said. It's boring, she replied. He looked up. You have a better idea? Yeah, she said, smirking. We met at a coffee shop. You annoyed me. I insulted you. You tipped too much. Love at first irritation. He laughed. The sound startled even him. That's dangerously believable. Because it's true, she said. The air shifted between them. Quiet, soft, too close. He cleared his throat. This is business. After Friday, it's over. Relax, Harlow, she said, standing. I don't fall for men who treat emotions like spreadsheets. Good, he said. I don't fall for women who call me arrogant, she smiled, walking past him. Give it time. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and slow, like the world was holding its breath. Damien watched her walk away, her red scarf flickering against the gray night. He told himself this was just a deal. Just a harmless lie, but deep down he knew better. Because some lies are too perfect, too dangerous, to stay pretend. The night of the gala came faster than either of them expected. Days of rehearsing smiles and fake stories had passed in a blur, and now it was time to perform. The Waldorf Astoria gleamed under the winter sky, its ballroom glowing like gold and glass. Outside, limousines lined the curb. Inside, laughter mingled with the clinking of champagne flutes and the hum of money. Damien Harlow adjusted his cufflinks by the entrance, outwardly calm but restless underneath. He wasn't nervous about investors. He wasn't even nervous about Harper Lynn. He was nervous about her. And then, as the elevator doors slid open, his heart stopped. Elena Cruz stepped out, in a red silk dress that caught the light like fire. The transformation was almost surreal. She didn't look like the woman from the cafe anymore. For a second, Damien forgot how to breathe. She walked toward him carefully, smoothing her skirt. "I feel ridiculous," she muttered. "You look believable," he said, voice low. She gave him a look. "Liar," he smiled faintly. "Ready to meet the wolves? Lead the way, Mr. Harlow." The ballroom seemed to inhale as they entered. Whispers trailed behind them. His name, her name, half-truths floating in perfume and curiosity. Damien kept his expression cool. Elena kept her grip steady on his arm, even though she could feel her pulse thundering. He leaned close enough for her to hear. "You're doing fine," he murmured. "You mean lying," she replied under her breath. "Semantics," he said. They reached the main table where Harper Lynn stood waiting, tall, elegant, polished, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Damien," she greeted smoothly. "You clean up nicely." "Harper," he replied with equal poise. "It's been a while." Her gaze shifted to Elena. "And this must be the mysterious wife I've heard nothing about." Elena extended her hand, smiling politely. "Elena Harlow. It's lovely to finally meet you." Harper's eyes flicked down to the ring on Elena's finger, then back up. "Likewise. I must say, you weren't at the last summit, were you?" "No," Elena said lightly. "Someone has to keep him from skipping meals and deadlines." A ripple of polite laughter circled the table. Harper's lips curved, but her eyes stayed cold. Dinner moved in slow motion. The room shimmered with conversation and half-meant compliments. Elena played her role flawlessly, answering every question with warmth that felt natural. Damien watched her from across the table, almost forgetting where the act ended. Harper's voice broke the moment. "So tell me," she said, resting her chin on her hand, "what's the secret to your happy marriage?" The question hit like a small explosion. Elena hesitated, fork pausing midair. Then she smiled softly. "We argue," she said simply. The table laughed. A lot. But somehow we always find our way back to each other. Coffee in the morning, quiet at night. I think that's what love is. Not the perfect moments, the ordinary ones that still feel safe. Her voice trembled just enough to sound real. And maybe it was. Under the table, Damien's hand found hers. He told himself it was part of the act, but he didn't let go. Later, Harper invited them to the terrace for fresh air. Outside, the city glowed beneath them. "How long have you two been married?" Harper asked, swirling her wine. 3 years, Damien said smoothly. 4, Elena corrected, smiling. "Right," he said, recovering fast. "Time flies when you're happy." Harper tilted her head. 4 years and not a single photo in the press? That's rare. Elena's eyes glinted. "We like keeping our happiness private. It survives better that way." Harper studied her for a moment, then smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "You're quite charming, Mrs. Harlow." "Occupational hazard," Elena said easily. "I work with people all day. You learn to smile even when you don't want to." Damien bit back a grin. She was too good at this. Back inside, the lights dimmed, and the band shifted to something slow, a velvet rhythm that filled the room. "Dance with me," Damien said quietly. "We're still being watched." "You really take your pretending seriously," she teased, but she took his hand anyway. They moved together under the chandelier's golden light. Her hand rested on his shoulder. His palm fit at her waist, warm, steady. For a while, neither spoke. The noise around them faded. Elena looked up at him. "You're not terrible at this." "I'm full of surprises." She smiled faintly. "You almost look like you're enjoying it." "Almost," he said, but there was a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "You were amazing tonight." "So were you," she replied quietly. "Almost too amazing. What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "you almost believed yourself." When the song ended, Harper appeared again, her smile perfect. "Congratulations, Damien. You've outdone yourself." "Always do," he said lightly. "Your wife is remarkable," Harper added, her tone dripping with meaning. Elena met her gaze without flinching. "He needs someone to keep him in line." Harper's laughter was low and sharp. "Then you're exactly what he deserves." She turned and left, perfume lingering like a warning. As the crowd began to thin, Damien and Elena slipped into the quiet of the hotel lobby. The noise of the gala faded behind them. Elena sighed. "Well, that was exhausting." "You were perfect," he said. "Don't say that," she replied. "I might start charging extra." He laughed, then caught her eyes, and the laughter softened into silence. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving me tonight." "It was just a role, Damien." "Maybe," he said, but it didn't feel like one. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the street in white. A car waited by the curb. Elena turned toward it. "Back to real life," she murmured. "Back to pretending," he corrected softly. She hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Good night, Mr. Harlow." "Good night, Mrs. Harlow." She slipped into the car and disappeared into the night, leaving him standing alone under the lobby's golden light. And for the first time in years, Damien realized he didn't feel empty anymore. He felt terrified, because the lie they'd built together had started to feel dangerously close to the truth. The rain came suddenly that night, heavy and endless, as if the whole city decided to drown its secrets at once. The gala was over. The laughter, the lights, the polite applause, all faded into the background of Damien's mind. But one thing remained sharp and alive, her, Elena Cruz. They drove back in silence. The car hummed softly against the wet pavement, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. She sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap, staring out the window as the city blurred into streaks of gold and gray. Neither spoke. The air between them was thick, not with awkwardness, but with something unnamed, something dangerous. When the car stopped in front of her building, she reached for the handle immediately. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "You played your part well tonight." He gave a small, humorless smile. "So did you," she nodded, her hand still on the door. The sound of the rain filled the silence between them. "Elena," he said quietly. She turned. Yes, his eyes were on her. Not the businessman's eyes that calculated and controlled, but something softer, rawer, like he was seeing her for the first time without the armor. "Tonight, when you spoke about us, about love, was any of it real?" She hesitated. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," she exhaled, shaking her head. "It was a story, Damien. That's all it ever was." He nodded slowly, but there was a flicker of something. Disappointment, maybe grief, that crossed his face before he looked away. "Right," he said quietly. "A story." Elena opened the door, the cold air rushing in with the scent of rain. But before she could step out, he reached for her wrist. It wasn't rough, just enough to make her stop. "Elena." She turned back, startled, and in that moment, something in him broke. He pulled her closer and kissed her. It wasn't careful. It wasn't polite. It was sudden, fierce, desperate. The kind of kiss that felt like it had been waiting for years. The rain roared outside, blurring the world into sound and heartbeat. For one impossible moment, the lie they'd been living dissolved, and all that was left was truth. Then she pushed him away. Her breath came uneven, her voice trembling but sharp. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't turn me into another lie." He stared at her, chest rising and falling. "That's not what this is, isn't it?" she said, eyes bright with anger, or maybe pain. "This Whatever you think it is, wasn't part of the deal. I told you from the start, I don't do make-believe offstage. Elena, no, she cut in. You wanted a wife to save your reputation, not a woman to confuse your guilt. He flinched but didn't look away. You think this is guilt? He asked quietly. You think I don't know what lies do to people? I've paid for them, and with everything I had. My company, my name, my marriage. She looked at him then, really looked, at the exhaustion behind his anger, the vulnerability behind his pride. I've already been someone's lie, Damien, she said softly, and I swore I'd never do that again. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. For a long time, neither moved. The rain pounded against the windshield, drowning out the rest of the world. Finally, Damien exhaled, his voice low and rough. Then I guess we both built walls for the same reason, to keep something out. She didn't answer. She couldn't. He leaned back, his hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes closed as if fighting the urge to speak again. When he finally looked at her, his gaze had softened. Good night, Elena. She nodded once, opened the door, and stepped into the rain. The cold hit her instantly, soaking through her dress, her hair, her skin. She didn't run for cover. She just stood there for a second, eyes closed, letting it wash everything away. The lie, the heat of his touch, the confusion burning in her chest. Inside the car, Damien watched her through the fogged glass. She looked fragile and unyielding all at once, like someone made of light and stone. For a fleeting moment, he wanted to get out, to go after her, to say something. Anything. But he didn't. He stayed where he was, letting the rain blur her shape until she was gone. That night, neither of them slept. Elena sat by her window, hair still damp, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The city outside was silent now, washed clean by the storm. She told herself the kiss meant nothing, a slip of impulse, a moment of weakness. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel it. The warmth, the ache, the truth she didn't want to admit, that for 1 second she'd wanted it too. Across town, Damien lay awake on his couch, staring at the ceiling. The echo of her voice haunted him. Don't turn me into another lie. He'd built his life on pretending, convincing the world he was invincible, but tonight, he couldn't even convince himself. He got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights reflected on the wet streets. Somewhere out there, she was awake too. He could feel it, and for the first time in years, Damien Harlow, the man who had once controlled everything, realized there was something he couldn't fix, something he couldn't buy, something he couldn't undo, something that had already begun the moment he kissed her. It rained until morning. And when the sun finally broke through the clouds, both of them stepped into the new day pretending nothing had changed, even though everything had, because sometimes the most dangerous truth is the one that starts with a single lie, and a kiss that wasn't supposed to happen. The morning after the gala, the world seemed deceptively peaceful. Chicago was washed in pale winter light, quiet and slow, as if pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. By noon, Damien's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, he ignored it. Then one notification froze him completely. Tech mogul Damien Harlow's fake marriage exposed, inside his elaborate lie. The headline hit him like a punch. There were photos from the gala, whispers turned into paragraphs, and Harper Lynn's name printed in polished betrayal. Her statement was short, venom wrapped in elegance. It's unfortunate Mr. Harlow felt the need to deceive potential investors. I truly hope he finds his integrity again. It was Harper's style, destroy someone without ever raising her voice. Within hours, Damien's world collapsed. Investors vanished, partnerships dissolved, reporters camped outside his building. Every channel, every article, every online feed painted him as a fraud. The new con man of tech, one outlet said. A desperate genius, said another. The irony was suffocating. All the times he'd been accused of arrogance. And now he couldn't even defend himself. But amid the chaos, one name haunted him most, Elena. She hadn't answered any calls. He drove across the city until he found her small apartment swarmed by cameras and reporters. Through the crowd, he caught a glimpse of her, coat wrapped tightly, eyes hidden beneath a scarf, holding Noah's tiny hand. The sight tore something inside him. He called out, pushing through. "Elena!" She turned sharply. Her face was pale and tired. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice trembling. "I had to see you," he replied. "For what?" she snapped. "To apologize? To make yourself look better? You think I leaked it?" "I don't care who did," she said. "It doesn't matter. You and I were supposed to pretend. But now my son's face is on TV. My job's gone. And people are knocking on my door asking if I sold my soul for $25,000. She bit her lip, trying not to cry. "You can't fix this, Damien. You can't fix what was never real." Then she walked away. He didn't follow. For once, he couldn't. That night, Damien sat in his office, surrounded by silence that used to hum with ambition. His phone rang again. The name on the screen dragged him back to another life. Lydia. He almost didn't pick up. But she kept calling. When he finally answered, her voice was syrup-sweet. "Damien," she purred, "you're in trouble. You always did enjoy stating the obvious." "I can help," she said. "I have connections, PR, money. I can rebuild your image, for a price." He exhaled. "And what would that be?" 30% of whatever you're rebuilding," she said smoothly. "You get your name back. I get what I deserve." He almost laughed. "You don't change." "No," she replied, her tone sharp. "But you've lost everything. Maybe it's time you learned how to play smart." He hung up before she could finish. Hours later, he sat in the dark, staring at the reflection in his window. A man who'd once thought control could save him. Harper had destroyed his reputation. Lydia wanted to profit from his ruin. And Elena. She had every reason to hate him, but the truth was, she was the only person who had ever seen him without the armor. The only one who looked past the name, the company, the ego, and saw the broken pieces underneath. He thought of her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she made even lies sound honest. Somewhere between all of it, she had taught him what it meant to be real. And he had repaid her with chaos. By dawn, he'd made his decision. If he couldn't fix his name, at least he could fix what he'd broken in her world. He called a few people, quietly, discreetly, moved what little money he still had into an account for her and Noah. Then he found out where she was going. The 8:45 train to Detroit. The station was half asleep when he arrived. The cold air smelled of iron and coffee, and his breath came out in clouds as he scanned the crowd. There she was, near the edge of the platform, suitcase at her feet, Noah bundled against her chest. She looked smaller somehow, like someone who'd finally run out of fight. "Elena!" he called, his voice echoing. She turned, startled. "Damien," she said quietly, "you shouldn't have come." "I had to," he said, stepping closer. "Please, just listen. There's nothing left to say." "Yes, there is," he said, voice breaking. "You were right. About everything. I built my whole life on pretending, and you walked into it with nothing but truth. You taught me what real is, Elena. Don't let this world take that from you." Her eyes shimmered. "Real doesn't survive in your world, Damien." "Then I'll build a new one," he said. "One where lies don't destroy people like you." She shook her head. "You can't change the world." "Maybe not," he said softly. "But you changed mine." The speakers crackled with the final boarding call. She swallowed hard, looking down at Noah. "Goodbye, Damien." He nodded slowly. "Goodbye, Elena." She turned away, pulling her son close, and stepped onto the train. The doors closed, and within moments, the sound of wheels on steel drowned out everything else. He stood there long after the train disappeared into the gray morning. The station emptied around him. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from something he couldn't name. For the first time in years, Damien Harlow wasn't thinking about success, redemption, or revenge. He was thinking about a woman who had walked into his lie, and somehow left him with the only truth he'd ever known. The press conference was never meant to be a spectacle. Damien had chosen a small room, not a grand stage. No PR team, no glossy backdrop, just a row of microphones and 100 flashing cameras ready to dissect his every word. The city buzzed outside, but inside, the air felt heavy, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. He stood there, hands steady, even as the lights glared down on him. His reflection in the lens, tired, hollow-eyed but calm. A man stripped bare of everything except his truth. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice low but clear. "My name is Damien Harlow, and I am here to tell you what really happened." A rustle ran through the room. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready, hungry for blood. He took a breath. "The rumors are true. The marriage between me and Elena Cruz was not real. It started as a business arrangement, a lie built to impress investors, to protect what was left of my company. It was my idea. She was never part of the deception. She agreed only because I gave her no choice that night, because I dangled a check big enough to save her son's life." Gasps filled the room. The flash of cameras relentless. Damien continued, voice steady but soft. "I told myself it was harmless, that no one would get hurt. But I was wrong. I hurt the only person who ever treated me with kindness when I deserved none of it. I thought I could control the story. Instead, it controlled me." Someone shouted, "Are you saying you fell in love with her?" Damien paused. The words caught in his throat, raw, heavy, real. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." The room erupted, questions overlapping, flashes blinding, chaos spilling. But for once, he didn't flinch. He raised a hand, quieting the noise. "I fell in love with her because she saw me when no one else did. Not as a CEO, not as a failure, not as a headline, just as a man. And I betrayed that. There's no excuse, no spin. I'm not here to save my image. I'm here to end the lie properly and take responsibility for it." A journalist asked, "Are you aware you could face charges for fraud?" He nodded. "Yes, and I'll face whatever comes. But the truth had to be told. She deserves that much." For a moment, silence. Just the hum of cameras. Then, from the back of the room, a familiar voice spoke. Calm, poised, deliberate. "Then perhaps," said Harper Lynn, stepping forward, "the truth is enough." All heads turned. Harper was immaculate as always, her expression unreadable. She walked toward the podium, every click of her heels echoing through the room. She stopped beside him, eyes meeting his. And for once, there was no hostility, no accusation. Only quiet understanding. "You always thought power came from control," she said softly, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. "But it turns out it comes from letting go." He looked at her, uncertain. "Harper," she lifted a hand. "I've spoken to my legal team. The lawsuit's off." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "You've already lost more than any court could take. And for what it's worth," her voice softened, "you may have lost everything, Damien, but at least this time you chose the right person to lose it for." Then she turned and left, leaving silence in her wake, the kind that no one dared to fill. Across town, in a small apartment, Elena sat on the edge of her couch, eyes fixed on the flickering TV screen. Her hands trembled, a half-finished mug of coffee growing cold beside her. She hadn't meant to watch it. She told herself she wouldn't, that it didn't matter anymore. But when his face appeared on the screen, something inside her broke. He looked different. Not the man who'd stood beside her at the gala. Not the arrogant entrepreneur she'd once accused of playing God with people's lives. He looked human, vulnerable. She listened as he confessed everything. The contract, the lie, the guilt, and finally, her name. When he said, "I fell in love with her," she froze. Her breath caught. Tears welled before she could stop them. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. No performance, no defense, just truth. The kind of truth that couldn't be faked even if he tried. For the first time, Elena realized something. He wasn't the liar anymore. Not the manipulator she'd met months ago. Not the man who'd used his charm to survive. He was someone new, rebuilt from the wreckage, fragile but honest. And she, the woman who'd sworn never to believe in anyone again, couldn't stop crying. Noah stirred awake in the next room, his small voice breaking her trance. "Mom, are you okay?" She wiped her tears quickly and smiled. "Yeah, baby. I'm okay," but she wasn't. Not really. Because forgiveness doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives quietly, like the first light after a long, sleepless night. She turned off the TV, sat there for a long time and whispered into the silence. "You finally told the truth, Damien." And though he couldn't hear her, somewhere, she knew, he was finally at peace too. That night, the city slept under a blanket of rain again, but this time, it wasn't the sound of endings. It was the sound of something beginning. Because when a man has nothing left to protect, that's when he finally learns how to be real. And for Damien Harlow, that truth, painful, fragile, human, was the first step toward redemption. Spring came late that year. Chicago thawed slowly, as if the city itself didn't quite believe in warmth anymore. The snow melted into rain, the rain into soft light, and somewhere between the gray mornings and golden evenings, life began to move again. Months had passed since the scandal. Damien Harlow had disappeared from the headlines. The man once called the fraud of Silicon Valley had become a ghost. His company was gone, his penthouse sold, his fortune scattered. For the first time in years, he lived quietly. No cameras, no press, no meetings that measured his worth. Just work, real, simple work. He spent mornings fixing things at a local garage, afternoons volunteering at a youth tech center. He didn't tell anyone who he used to be, and no one asked. It was peaceful in a way he didn't know peace could feel. But every now and then, when the air turned still and the city lights blurred through the rain, he thought of her. The woman who had looked at him once and seen a man. Not a brand. Elena. He hadn't seen her since that morning at the station. He'd replayed that moment more times than he wanted to admit. The way her voice broke when she said goodbye. The way she didn't look back. And every time he remembered it, it hurt a little less. But it never really stopped hurting. Then, one late afternoon in early April, he found himself walking through an old neighborhood he barely recognized. A small sign above a corner shop caught his eye. The Honest Bean Cafe. He smiled at the name before he even realized why. The windows were open, and the smell of coffee drifted into the street. Cinnamon, vanilla, and something faintly familiar. He stopped at the door. Inside, the space was cozy, painted in soft cream and green. A few tables, some mismatched chairs, a bookshelf full of secondhand novels. And behind the counter, her Elena Cruz. She was pouring milk into a cup, hair tucked behind her ear, face calm and focused. She looked older somehow, not in years but in peace. There were faint lines of exhaustion still, but also something new. Steadiness. He stood frozen, hand on the door, for what felt like forever. Then she looked up. Their eyes met, and time folded in on itself. Elena blinked once, as if her brain needed to catch up with what her heart already knew. "Damien?" He smiled faintly. "Hey." For a moment neither spoke. The espresso machine hissed quietly in the background, the only sound between them. "You're here," she finally said. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to be," he admitted. Her lips parted slightly, caught between surprise and something softer. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "Neither did I," he said. "But here we are." Later, when the rush hour faded and the cafe emptied, she poured him a cup herself, black, no sugar, just like before. He looked around. "You did this," he said quietly. "You made something good again." Elena smiled, the kind that carried both pride and humility. "I had to. I needed to build something real this time." "You always did," he said. "I just didn't see it." She sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her cup. "What happened to you after—" "I lost everything," he said simply. "Then I stopped trying to get it back." He paused, eyes distant. "Turns out when you lose everything, you finally see what's worth keeping." Her gaze softened. "And what's that?" He looked at her, steady and unflinching. "You." She froze, caught off guard. Damien, I know, he interrupted gently. You don't owe me anything. I ruined your peace, your job, your safety. You have every right to hate me, but I've spent months trying to forget, and I can't. Because when everything else fell apart, you were the only thing that made me want to be honest again. Elena looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. You think words can fix what happened? No, he said softly, but maybe actions can. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A small silver ring, its surface matte and imperfect, shaped by hand. She stared at it. What is that? It's not jewelry, he said. It's a piece of my old company, the last circuit board I ever kept. I melted it down myself. Her eyes widened. You made this? He nodded. It's not much, but it's what's left of everything I used to be. All the mistakes, all the noise. I wanted to turn it into something that meant something real. He took a slow breath. Elena Cruz, I lost the world chasing everything that didn't matter. And somehow I found you. The one thing that did. Don't make me lose you again. She blinked, tears gathering before she could stop them. Damien, he smiled faintly. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning it if you let me. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the hum of the coffee machine. Then slowly she reached out, her fingers trembling, and picked up the ring. It was warm from his hand. She turned it over, as if she could feel the story trapped inside. She laughed softly through the tears. It's the ugliest, most beautiful ring I've ever seen. He laughed too, the sound low and shaky. I'll take that as a yes? She hesitated only a second before nodding. Yes. The word broke something open between them, like light breaking through cloud after months of gray. Damien stood, and she stood too, and suddenly they were in each other's arms. No pretense, no act, no audience. Just them. From the back room, a small voice piped up. Mom! They pulled apart just in time to see Noah running toward them, holding a cookie bigger than his hand. He stopped short, looking up at Damien curiously. Elena knelt, smiling through tears. Noah, do you remember Mr. Harlow? The boy nodded slowly, suspiciously. You're the man who made Mommy sad. Damien winced, kneeling down too. Yeah, he said quietly. I was. But I'd like to be the man who makes her smile now. Noah looked between them, then at the silver ring in his mother's hand. After a long, serious pause, he wrapped his arms around both of them. Okay, he said simply. Elena let out a broken laugh, hugging him tight. Damien's arms came around them both, pulling them close. For the first time in a long time, everything felt whole again. Weeks turned into months. The honest bean thrived. People came for the coffee but stayed for the warmth. Damien worked behind the counter some days, wearing a simple gray shirt and an apron that didn't fit quite right. He learned how to steam milk, burn cookies, fix leaky pipes, and laugh again. Sometimes customers recognized him, the fallen mogul who disappeared. But when they asked, he just smiled and said, I used to build machines. Now I build better mornings. Every night, after closing, Elena would sit with him by the window, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the city lights flicker. They didn't talk much about the past anymore. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full, not of regret, but of peace. One evening, as the first snow of the next winter began to fall, Damien took her hand and whispered, You know, I used to think success was about how high I could climb. And now, she asked softly, now I think it's about who's waiting when you fall. Elena smiled, eyes glistening. That sounds like something a man in love would say. He kissed her hand. That's because I am. Outside, the snow kept falling. Slow, quiet, endless, covering the city in a soft white forgiveness. And inside that tiny cafe on a forgotten Chicago street, two people who once lived behind lies found something rare and true. Love that didn't save them from the world, but made surviving it worth it. A year passed. Not fast, not slow, just in the gentle way time moves when life stops breaking things and starts healing them. Chicago had changed, and so had they. The world no longer whispered Damien Harlow's name with scandal or curiosity. It barely whispered it at all. and that was exactly how he liked it. He and Elena lived in a small cottage near Lake Michigan, a quiet place with peeling white paint, a porch that creaked in the morning wind, and a garden that smelled like rosemary and rain. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Some mornings, Damien would wake before sunrise, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The air was cold enough to sting, but the warmth beside him, Elena's soft breathing, the faint sound of Noah's laughter from the next room, made it feel like home. He'd never really had a home before. He'd had penthouses and power, but never peace. And now, with her, he had both, in the simplest, most ordinary way. Elena's cafe, the Honest Bean, had grown quietly into something of a local legend. People came not just for coffee, but for the feeling, that strange, rare kind of calm that followed you out the door. Damien helped sometimes, though he was terrible at taking orders and even worse at baking. The regulars found it endearing. One afternoon, a reporter dropped by, not the kind with flashing cameras or aggressive questions, but a young woman from a community journal who'd heard about the new charity Damien had started. He called it the Phoenix Project. It wasn't about technology or innovation this time. It was about people, specifically. Women like Elena. Women who'd been told no one too many times, who'd raised children alone, who'd been broken by the world and still kept moving. With the small inheritance he salvaged from his ruined company, Damien built a foundation that provided microloans, mentorship, and education for single mothers trying to start small businesses. He kept his name off the headlines, letting others speak for him. But within that circle of coffee shop owners, artists, bakers, coders, his name was spoken differently now. Not as a mogul, but as a man who learned how to give back. When the reporter asked why he did it, he just smiled and said, "Because someone once believed in me when she shouldn't have." That evening, Elena teased him as they closed the cafe together. "You realize you've turned into one of those annoyingly humble philanthropists?" He laughed, drying a mug. "That's better than being an egomaniac in a penthouse, isn't it?" She smirked. Barely. They worked in companionable silence for a moment, the golden hour light spilling through the windows. The world outside was quiet, except for the soft rustle of wind and the faraway sound of the lake. Elena leaned against the counter, watching him. "Do you ever miss it? The rush, the spotlight, the chaos?" He looked up from the mug in his hand, thoughtful. "Sometimes I miss the noise," he admitted, but only because it made me appreciate the quiet now. He walked over, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I used to chase things I could measure. Money, power, headlines. Now I just want to build things I can hold." She smiled gently. "Like coffee cups and small dreams?" He nodded. "Exactly." A few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Elegant cream paper, sealed with gold. Elena found it on the porch one morning, tucked between bills and postcards. She read the front, then frowned slightly. "It's from Harper Lynn." Damien paused mid-step. "You're kidding." She shook her head, handing it over. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, like everything Harper did. Damien broke the seal, expecting arrogance, or maybe another press stunt. But it wasn't that. Inside was a simple message. "You're invited to the launch of Halo, a new chapter built from old lessons. Some men fall to ashes, others rise. Congratulations, Damien, for becoming both." HL, at the bottom, scribbled in smaller letters, was a line that made Elena's breath catch. A man reborn from ashes, and a woman who taught him how to fly again. For a moment, they both stood still. Then Elena exhaled softly. "Well," she said, "that's unexpected." Damien smiled faintly, folding the letter. Maybe she finally learned that burning things down isn't the only way to start over. "Are you going?" He hesitated. "No, that part of my life's over." She watched him for a moment. "You could still send flowers," he chuckled. "I already did. A long time ago." That evening, the sky over the lake turned into a canvas of amber and violet. Elena brewed 2 cups of coffee, the aroma weaving through the house. They sat together on the porch as the sun began to rise, its light spilling across the wooden rail, catching the steam from their cups. Damien looked out at the horizon. "You know," he said softly, I used to think happiness was something you chased. And now? She asked. Now I think it's something that finds you when you finally stop running. Elena smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Then I guess we finally stopped. He turned slightly, kissing the top of her hair. I think we finally started. Noah's laughter drifted from inside, mixed with the sound of the wind and waves. The house was small, imperfect, and alive. For a long time, they just sat there, two people who had once met in a lie, now held together by everything true. The light spilled across their hands, their cups, their faces. And as the first full beam of morning broke over the water, Damien whispered, "You know what the best part of rising from ashes is?" Elena looked up at him, smiling. "What?" "You get to choose what you become next." She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining with his. "Then let's choose this," she said softly. "Every morning, every time." He squeezed her hand. "Always." The sun climbed higher, painting them both in gold. The steam from their coffee curled upward into the new day, carrying with it everything they had been. The lies, the losses, the mistakes, and leaving behind only what mattered. Truth, love, and the quiet kind of happiness that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Thank you so much for listening to Behind the Curtain of Happiness. A story about loss, redemption, and the quiet kind of love that grows from honesty. If this story touched you, even just for a moment, if it made you smile, tear up, or believe in love again, please leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. Every like, every comment, every follow truly helps me keep creating more heartfelt stories for you. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing that love always finds its way back.